On today's show, we'll be breaking down the Philadelphia Flyers prospect pool and their overall 2024 draft haul.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this show, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I'm Sebastian High, the Director of European Scouting over at Dobber Prospects, typically joined by Hadi Kalakesh, but he is currently at the Hlinka Gretzky Tournament in Edmonton, so I am doing another solo episode here, and the focus today is going to be on the Broad Street Bullies, the Philadelphia Flyers, and their overall prospect pool. We're going to talk about the players that they added into the fold at the 2024 draft in Las Vegas, as well as their overall prospect pool, whether it be Matvei Michkov or young players that are already having made their debuts in the NHL and could be big difference makers both this season and in the years to come. In the final segment, we're also going to very much look ahead at next season and talk about the potential expectations and hopes for this team as a whole, as well as for the individuals and especially the young players and what could be hoped or expected of them in terms of production this upcoming season. But before we jump into the episode, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in free bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So for the first segment, we're going to be focusing on the 2024 NHL draft, and the Philadelphia Flyers definitely made some moves at the draft. They made one trade that was very notable, and that was in moving down in the first round by a single slot, because they apparently did not have the interest in drafting Zeev Buium at 12th overall, and he was available, and the Minnesota Wild really wanted him, which the Philadelphia Flyers facilitated because they had their own guy that they were targeting, and it sounds a lot like they didn't want to get the profile of Zeev Buium because they already have guys like Emil Andre and Cam York in their system. I cannot say I agree with that assessment because stylistically there are similarities between those players, but Zeev Buium is, in my opinion, like by far the best like projected NHLer of those three guys, and adding him into the fold would have also been a really big check mark for me in terms of the long-term projection of the blue line in Philadelphia. But he certainly does not play the game of hockey like the Broad Street Bullies are renowned to doing, with the pain-inflicting physicality. Buium's very cerebral, but instead what they did was with their first-round selection at 13th overall, they went out and took a swing on a player who was young for the draft class, really developed significantly over the course of the last season, and plays a style of hockey that every single fan and hockey player and anybody that watches him play can really appreciate and respect. That is Jett Luchanko, who was drafted out of the Guelph Storm. And this is a 5'11", 187-pound right shot centerman, and he is a natural centerman. He's an August 21st birthday, so he's not even turning 18 until after this episode is going to be posted. And he really progressed massively this year. He scored 20 goals and 74 points in 68 games in the OHL, also added 7 points in 7 games at the U18 World Championships, playing a really important role as one of Team Canada's only like true natural centermen in that lineup. And this is a player who you can rely on every single shift, every single night in all 3 zones of the ice. He is really speedy. He's really quick. He uses his feet to create space. Offensively, he's a really good playmaker. He's quite creative, but is also very pacey. When he sees something, he does not wait in order to do it. He does it immediately. He's really dogged in his approach to on-puck play. And the same can be said in his off-puck play. There's a really high motor that he brings. He's not like a bruising forward. He's 5'11". He's not going to hit players massively, but he's a really entertaining player who just plays the game of hockey the right way. And defensively, he's also really quite strong. This is a player that's going to be a true two-way forward at the NHL level, playing an important role down the middle. And while 13th overall is a bit rich for me, and I know a lot of other people agree with that, I can see the arguments why he was selected here, and I don't disagree with them. I like Jett Luchanko a lot. I didn't like him enough to have him ranked inside my top 15 or top 20, but I like him because of the way he plays the game and just how projectable he is. The way he plays the game is going to function at the NHL level. He doesn't have to overhaul how he approaches the game in order to be an effective NHLer. I don't think that really have much top line upside with this player, and I really think that the Flyers need centermen that can project as potential top line guys. But that said, I think he's going to be playing a really important role, hopefully on a second line long term for Philadelphia, potentially on a third. But a player who's going to be very valuable, play a lot of NHL games, and play a lot of NHL minutes in all situations, power play, penalty kill, both possibilities as well. And overall, a really intriguing player that I think Philadelphia Flyers fans are going to really appreciate, even if 13th overall was a really bullish swing to take on a player like Jett Luchanko. With their second pick of the draft in the second round at 51st overall, they went out and selected Jack Berglund, a player from Sweden that I've been quite intrigued by over the course of the last season. He's a 6'3", 209-pound centerman. He can also play on the left wing. He's a very meat and potato style of player. He's not going to wow you with dynamic stick skill. He's physical, he's direct, he's linear, he's a north-south kind of guy. But he also played his best hockey last season in the SHL. He played 8 games in the SHL with Färjestad BK, where he scored 1 goal. But in those games, he was very effective. This is a player who can plug into a bottom 6 of a pro team immediately, right away, as an 18-year-old, and be really effective. I think effective is really the name of the game with Berglund. He's not overly cerebral or intelligent in terms of how he processes the game, and his defensive implications are usually quite good and energetic, but he also doesn't read defensive situations as well as you might hope for a defensive oriented simple centerman to be playing the game at this point. But the SHL viewings are really good. At the J20 level against his own age group, he struggled a lot more, where he's in a role where he was expected to be a bit more of a dynamic creator, which he just isn't. And he did score 34 points in 41 games there, and but there were a couple of viewings that I logged at that level where he was a real beat behind, because at that level, it's all speed and all skill, and he just could not keep up with it. At the professional level, where it's a bit more of a conservative style, he excelled a lot more. Overall, in terms of NHL projection, I see Jack Berglund as a kind of guy that can crack a 4th line, maybe even a 3rd line in the next 3 to 4 years, but does not really have any upside beyond that. So very much just going for a shoe-in centerman for potentially a 4th line with this selection. Next up, we have Spencer Gill, the big right shot defenseman, 6'4", 185 pounds, from the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, or Quebec Maritime Junior Hockey League now. And he was selected in the second round at 59th overall. This past season with the Rimouski Oceanic, he scored 46 points in 65 games. This is a pretty mobile and creative right shot defenseman. He grew his passing game massively this season. He jumped from having a 4-point season in 41 games to that aforementioned 46-point season in just a year's time. His penalty minutes also massively increased in that time. Spending his time on ice obviously did as well. But he's been developing really nicely there in Rimouski, who are very skilled at developing players like Spencer Gill that have a massive frame, long range to work with, as well as a decent basis of mobility, and have some decent passing mechanics, but trying to haul that into a more dynamic two-way force. And we've been seeing that from Spencer Gill, even playing a bit internationally with Team Canada at the U18 World Championships. He wasn't playing much, but when he did, he's quite effective in the offensive zone in terms of using his passing ability to create. And I think there's a lot of intriguing upside with this player. I like this selection a lot. I don't think you're looking at a guy that's going to be anything more than number 4 defenseman long-term, but a really intriguing profile and something that I think the Philadelphia Flyers needed to add into the fold. Next up, another European player I like a lot. They're in the 4th round at 107th overall. The Flyers have selected Heikki Ruohonen, who is a Finnish centerman who played in the U20 SM Sarja last season, scoring 20 goals and 47 points in 37 games. He also played a really strong tournament at the U18 World Championships, where he scored 3 goals and 5 points in 5 games. He was one of Finland's best players at that tournament, and was just consistently being able to create with his big frame. He's very inside driven, and he's a good playmaker as well in tight. He's 6'2", 205 pounds. He's a powerful skater. He's a good playmaker. He's a good two-way force. His defensive impact strong. He's a June 19th birthday as well, so young for the draft class, a bit more developmental runway there with him. And he's moving over to the USHL this season, so the Flyers are going to have a lot of hands-on time with him, hopefully, as he'll be playing with the Dubuque Fighting Saints. An intriguing player that I think has some decent third-line upside if he's able to hit. Next up, we have Noah Powell, another really interesting pick, in my opinion, a 6'2", 201-pound right-shot right winger who was a D+1 in the draft this year, but absolutely lit up the USHL this past season, scoring 43 goals and 74 points in 61 games for Dubuque, the same program where Ruohonen is going to be moving this season. Powell, for himself, will not be on that same team this year, as he'll be making the switch over to Ohio State University in the NCAA. Powell is a sniper. He is powerful. He's a really intelligent, tactical player who I've really had a lot of appreciation for in the viewings that I've had. There's a real mix of deceptiveness, manipulation, and inside drive in his offensive game. He's able to get pucks from the wall to the middle quite easily and effectively, and overall has a good degree of both tools and also habits and I guess vision and intelligence as well. So a really decent swing, in my opinion, for the 5th round. He was picked 148th overall, and I think he could have gone higher than he did. So good selection there for the Flyers. With the second to last pick of the draft, Philadelphia went out and selected from the MHL, from Krasnaya Armia Moskva, Ilya Pautov. This is a 5'11", 168-pound left shot right winger who's also a really intelligent playmaker. He's been developing there in the MHL, as I mentioned, and he scored 15 goals and 45 points in 46 games last season. Pure production standpoint, that's perfectly fine for the MHL. And for these late round swings of players that, I mean, I haven't watched too much of Pautov myself. I've seen a couple games in passing of him where that playmaking has stood out, and there's a decent level of creativity and dynamism in his game. But I think that there's also a long developmental road for him until he could become an NHLer, which is the case for basically every single player drafted in the 6th round, as Pautov was at 173rd overall. With the final selection of the draft, or of their draft, Philadelphia picked at 205th overall in the 7th round, Austin Moline, a 6'5", 201-pound right shot defenseman who was playing for Shattuck St. Mary's in prep school hockey this past season. In 57 games, he scored 8 goals and 35 points. He's a massive player. Was able to use his reach and his strength to take a massive amount of space away from his opponents. At the prep school level, he was like really overwhelmingly dominant in his physicality and his rank and his reach. And he's also very active on the rush. He likes to jump in as a fourth attacker in those like rush sequences, maybe making like a 3-on-2 more of a 4-on-2 instead. And he's also a decent enough skater in all 4 directions. Good edge work as well, and overall an intriguing player with a really good frame to work with. And I think that with him and Spencer Gill, you have 2 intriguing, massive right shot defensemen who could fill in as like number 4 in Gill's case, or number 5, 6 in Moline's case long term. But as I said with Pautov as well, Moline's going to need a lot of time to develop, especially being drafted out of prep school hockey. We're going to see how his development chugs along, but I'm very curious to keep track of this player. I think overall, this draft class is solid for Philadelphia. Yes, there's perhaps a bit of controversy with that Jett Luchanko selection and trading out of a selection where Zeev Buium was available. But I think that there's a decent amount of players added in here that bring intriguing qualities to the equation. I don't think there were really any swings among these draft picks that were like the highest upside players that were left available when they were selected, but a lot of them bring a combination of intelligence, physicality, and offensive awareness to the equation. Whether that be Luchanko with perhaps intensity rather than physicality, but guys like Berglund and Gill and Ruhonen and Powell, they all combine those qualities very effectively, and it's quite clear that Philadelphia wants to build a big and mean team that is able to create decent sequences in the offensive zone, but is perhaps leaning a bit more on intensity than on pure dynamism. Overall, I'd give the draft class a B grade. I think that there's a decent amount of talent in here. I think they're going to get at least 2 NHLers out of these draft picks. Jett Luchanko is basically a slam dunk NHLer at this stage, and I'm curious to see how they develop. But in the next segment, we are going to be talking about the prospect pool as a whole, as well as a conversation about Matvei Michkov. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks to LED headlights, exhaust kits, and far more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, eBay Motors is always going to have exactly what it is that you are looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, which is available to US customers only, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. All right, let's keep this episode rolling here by delving into the prospect pool. We're going to go position by position here, starting off with the forwards, followed by the defense core, and then the goaltenders. And we're going to wrap up the segment by looking at the areas of need and weakness in this prospect pool, as well as the overall grade. So let's start off here with the big name, Matvei Michkov, the player who, against all expectations, is coming over to North America just a year after having been drafted, after falling in the draft, in large part due to concerns around his contract situation, which was another 3 years after being drafted. But that has now been voided with 2 years left on it, and he is officially a Philadelphia Flyer, having signed his entry-level contract and expected to be a scoring threat in the Philadelphia Flyers lineup as soon as this fall. And I'm very excited to see him at the NHL level, to see how he adapts. It's a very different style of hockey than he's been playing the last couple seasons with Sochi, which is not the most organized or structured team in the KHL, but a player who brings a ton of skill to the equation and is highly intelligent. His intelligence, in my opinion, is his biggest asset, even more so than his shot itself. He's able to find soft ice in the offensive zone extremely well, and he's also able to work with his teammates and his line mates to create bigger holes in defensive structures. He's a good passer. He's a good playmaker. He's a wicked shooter. I mean, the sniping ability has been the big focus with Michkov for quite some time now, and I think he will score 25 plus goals as an NHL rookie as long as he's playing like second line minutes, playing some power play time, and stay healthy this year. I think he will score a lot of goals. How effective he's going to be as a whole on the ice, that remains to be seen, because there's still a lot of issues in his game that need some more tinkering. The defensive work rate is definitely a part of that will have to be instilled by the Philadelphia coaching staff. He's a bit of a cherry picker, wanting to exit the zone before his teammates had even really secured possession in their own zone, which can lead to 5-on-4 sequences in the defensive zone, which isn't ideal at the NHL level. But while there are going to be growing pains with Michkov, I really do think that the good will far outweigh the bad. The intelligence, the raw skill, the dynamism, All of these assets that he has are going to be on display, and Philadelphia needs a player like Matvei Michkov, and that should create a big opening for Matvei Michkov to just go out and do his thing. He's going to have to be allowed to make mistakes. He's going to have to be allowed to learn the hard way, but I do think he's going to score a lot of goals along the way, and I think if he hits his upside, you're looking at a player who could be scoring 50-plus goals and 120-plus points a season. But again, a lot of development still will have to happen between now and then. But a really exciting prospect that I cannot wait to see on an NHL ice. But he's not the only forward prospect here. There are some other names here too. We've already talked about Jett Luchanko, a really intriguing player that I do believe could be a fantastic number 2 centerman in the NHL if he develops well. Denver Barkey is a really fun player playing with the London Knights in the OHL. He's been Easton Cowan's partner in crime for a couple seasons now, and he brings a really high motor with a lot of speed to the equation and a lot of skill as well. He's a fantastic playmaker. He's undersized, but he's really shifty, and he's able to roll off contact really quite nicely, and he's a player that I've always adored to watch. He's a guy that I think Flyers fans will fall in love with once he makes the jump to professional hockey, and I'm curious to see how his final season in the OHL is going to go. Devin Kaplan's another interesting name there among the forwards. He's been developing there in Boston in the NCAA, playing some good hockey. Hasn't really hit the upside that he was flashing in his draft year season with the NTDP, but still a guy that I think could fill into a bottom 6 role long term. Similar thing with guys like Jack Berglund and Heikki Rohonen, who we've already talked about, as well as 2 other players that I like a decent amount in this system, in Alexis Gendron, who's been developing in the QMJHL with a variety of organizations. And he's a really, really like pacey and gritty and super high motor, high energy type of player who has a wicked shot. He's been scoring for fun in the Q. He's already scored a couple goals as well in the AHL in just under 20 games where he played there last season. Before moving back to the QMJHL, and a player that I think is going to be a long-term fan favorite in a bottom 6 for the Flyers. Cole Knubel is also a player I've liked a decent amount. His first NCAA season as a freshman wasn't the most convincing in the world, with just around half a point a game in terms of production, but he's another guy who's high energy. He's very implicated. He's very engaged when he's on the ice, and he plays with soft ice very nicely. He's a good shooter as well, and has really learned the distribution game as well, especially playing down the middle. He splits his time between center and wing. But in terms of the defensemen, I also think there are some interesting names here, though I think that there's a distinct lack of potential star power here. Oliver Bonk is the biggest name here. He was the first-round selection as well. After Matvei Michkov a year ago, also developing with the London Knights. He's a pretty big body, has a hard shot, defensively solid and responsible. He's positionally aware. He has a good mobility, good range. He's a decent rush defender. I don't think there's anything that he does at an exceptional level, but there's a lot of things he does quite well. So a player that I think could be a really solid second pairing guy long term. I don't know if he's a number 3 or number 4 in that constellation, but I struggle to project him as a potential top pairing piece, specifically due to that lack of exceptional qualities, but a player that is going to be playing important minutes for the Flyers for a really long time, even if he's not the flashiest. Emil Andre has also been playing some decent hockey already in North America. He's also gotten into a couple NHL games already, and part of the reason that they didn't draft Zeev Buium, so clearly a player that the Flyers organization believes in a lot. He's a good playmaker. He's mobile. There's a lot to like with his overall profile, but he's far from a slam dunk NHLer in my mind. There's still a lot that has to kind of break the right way. But if he hits his ceiling, he could become a number 3 defenseman. There is significant upside in his profile. And finally, there's another 2 right chop defensemen that I wanted to mention. First off, Spencer Gill. We already talked about him. He's really good and really exciting and really fun profile to kind of work with and mold and try to direct towards a 2-way type of role in the NHL long term. And the other guy is Carter Sotheran, who plays for the Portland Winterhawks and was the pairing mate for Luca Cagnoni there, and a player that I think has a lot of underrated qualities. Offensively, he's not superb or flashy, but he has a decent shot. He's mobile. He activates when there's space to open up and to step into. And defensively, he's just really solid. I like him a lot. He's a player that I think could be a really solid bottom pairing piece long term. I think the upside beyond that's quite limited, but a player that I just have an appreciation for. Last but not least, the goaltenders. We have Carson Bjarnason, of course, second round draft pick from a year ago. Been playing good hockey in the WHL. He's really quite big. He's like 6'4". He's athletic. He has tremendous use of his legs and his pads in terms of taking away the bottom of the net, and a player that has been playing some decent hockey as well internationally for Team Canada. You also have Yegor Zavragin, who's a player that I like a bunch. He hasn't even turned 19 yet, despite being drafted a year ago. He's a late August birthday, and he's just been playing exceptional hockey wherever he's gone, whether it be at the MHL level, where he is dominant in Russia, which is unsurprising because it's not the most difficult thing in the world to stand out as a goaltender in terms of the numbers at the MHL level. But he also played fantastically at the VHL level, which is the second division of pro hockey in Russia. And overall, he's been really, really good. He's athletic. He's not the biggest guy in the world at like 6'1", 6'2", but he's really intelligent. He tracks pucks very, very well and has adapted to the professional game very seamlessly. Last but not least, we also have Alexei Kolosov, who is going to be playing in Lehigh Valley this season. And he's a player who also has been playing in the KHL for quite a few years now. He's an 02 birthday. He's 22 years old. And he's had like 2 full seasons in the KHL under his belt, playing over 40 games a year with Dynamo Minsk. And also another 2 seasons where he's gotten into like 15, 20 games as well for that same program. So 4 years of KHL experience, and his effectiveness has just increased as well with time. And he's a player that I think could be a decent addition there in the AHL system. But I think as a whole, this prospect pool still has a couple big areas of need. They still need a projected 1C. I think that is desperately lacking in this organization. And they also need some more high-end defensemen to kind of take the mantle when the current regime kind of graduates, whether it be Travis Sanheim. Not sure how long he's going to stick around, whether it will be for the entirety of his contract and what role he's going to be in when that contract ends. I think adding in some more high-end defensive prospects would be very useful, and that's one of the reasons that I would have very much liked seeing Ziv Buim as well be the selection at 12th overall for Philadelphia. But it was not to be, and I think that there's still a lot to like in this pool. It gets a B grade for me as a whole. Matvei Michkov does a lot of heavy lifting there in terms of the raw upside, but you have a lot of supporting cast that I think is really intriguing and has very tangible NHL futures. So a fun prospect pool with quite a few players that I have quite a bit of affection towards, and how they approach the game, how they play the game. There's a real identity among the players that are being selected by Philadelphia. They want to build something very specific. That much is clear. But that wraps up this second segment, and we'll be right back in the third to wrap up the show and look ahead at the 2024-25 season. I love sports. I love them so much that I just never want them to stop. But with the playoffs having wrapped up, the free agency and NHL draft now being in the rear view, we have fewer and fewer games to get excited about. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going all summer long, whenever I want, wherever I am. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. Every single day, every single person will get something all summer long. So head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Alrighty, let's wrap up the show here in the final segment by looking ahead at the 2024-25 season. The Philadelphia Flyers are going to look to bounce back a little bit. They underperformed in many ways last season, and many players that they were leaning on just weren't the most reliable or effective or game-changing when they needed them to be. But there's going to be an influx of talent with Matvei Michkov specifically. There weren't really that many other offseason moves that Philadelphia has made so far to really change the constellation of that lineup. But a lot will hinge on young players taking steps forward, whether it be Michkov developing and being a potential 30-goal guy while playing like top 6 minutes and adding a lot of dynamism and skill and the ability to break open the game to the equation, whether it be Tyson Forster as well and taking a step, Bobby Brink, Jamie Drysdale, Cam York. There's a lot of names of young players here that could really, really help this team by taking another step in their development. But if they don't, I don't know if Philadelphia is going to be a playoff team this year or even really contending for the wild card spots, because there's so many teams in the East that will be fighting for a very, very limited amount of spots. You're going to have only 8 teams from the East making the playoffs, and it's going to be very difficult to be one of them when you are a team that has to fight their way into that mix and that missed it last season. And a lot of teams that missed the playoffs last season in the East are going to be well in the fight this year, whether it be Detroit, whether it be Ottawa. You might even see the Habs make a bit of a push. It's going to be an interesting season and a lot of competition, especially coming from the Atlantic Division. But I'm curious to see how Philadelphia is going to approach this season, how they're going to approach building up their lineup and kind of matching their players together and seeing who works together in terms of chemistry. I'd love to see Matvei Michkov in a top 6 role out of the gate, because that's where he can make a difference. If you're putting him on a checking line, he is not going to be effective, and he's going to struggle massively, and his development's not going to be aided particularly well in that case either. So a lot will hinge on that utilization of Michkov, but I would love to see a pairing of Michkov and Tyson Forster in terms of like a second line grouping for Philadelphia this season. Forster is highly intelligent. He also has a wicked shot and could also help Michkov practice his playmaking a little bit more, but he also brings a ton of defensive value to the equation, and that's something that you really need to insulate Michkov. On top of that, you're going to have 2 young players building chemistry together. I think that would be very interesting. And I could see Michkov scoring 30 goals and 50 points in a good situation where he's able to build that type of chemistry. As for Tyson Forster, I think he's also going to take a step in his offensive production, maybe scoring 25 goals and 45 points this year. Bobby Brink's another young player that could really take a big step in the right direction, playing likely a middle 6 or bottom 6 role. But I think he could get around 15 goals and 35 points this year. He's really skilled. He's really feisty. He never stops working. And I think that he's going to win a spot in the Philadelphia lineups for good in training camp this year. And I think a lot is also going to hinge on a big name on the blue line, the return of the Cutter Gauthier trade. And that's a Jamie Drysdale, who really struggled in his first half season or so in Philadelphia. He was playing rough defensive hockey. He was struggling to make an impact offensively, even on the power play. And overall was just not the Jamie Drysdale that we've been used to seeing going back to his draft year. And it seems like his development has been stagnating a little bit, but obviously it's a massive shift to be traded as like a 21-year-old who was picked top 10. And we're going to see how he is able to find a groove this season with having a full offseason and training camp to get ready for season, playing in Philadelphia's system. I also would love to see him paired with a guy like Cam York. I think that could be a really nice offensive leaning pairing, but you also have a bunch of mobility with both of those players, and I think Cam York could also take a big step in his offensive production. I think he could score 12 goals, 40 points, or something along those lines this season. And with Drysdale, I'd be hoping for him to crack the 30-point mark for the second time in his career, maybe getting 5 goals, 25 assists, something along those lines. But of course, if he's able to like absolutely blow up and be the big offensive defenseman that he's been touted to become for so long, that he's shown so many flashes of being able to do at times sporadically, I think that it's a different story for Philadelphia this season. If you're able to have Drysdale step up and be a potential offensive driver on a top pairing or as a number 3 defenseman, it's a very different look on the blue line for this team. So very curious to see how everything falls into place in that lineup, which players are able to really grasp the big opportunities that are going to be there and available to them in terms of making a difference night in, night out. And yeah, I think Philadelphia is going to be a fun team to keep kind of observing in their development as a unit, as well as the individual storylines here, whether it be Tyson Forster as this highly intelligent 2-way centerman who's been playing excellent hockey at both ends of the ice already in his young career. Or, of course, Matvei Michkov. How is he going to be as a rookie? I'd love to hear from you as well in the comments. What are your point projections from Michkov? How do you think he's going to be deployed? How do you think he's going to play on the ice? Like, what is he going to do really well? What is he going to struggle at in his first NHL season? I'd love to hear from you down below. But that wraps things up for us here today. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, please do leave us a comment, whether it be about Michkov or anything else that we've covered here today, or anything else that you might want to mention in the comments. We're always happy to read what you all have to say. If you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please make sure to make us your first listen of the day. It is always appreciated. We have a bunch of appreciation for our everydayers. And for your second listen of the day, you can head on over to Locked On Sports Today, a 24-hour news show that covers everything going on in the sporting world today. That is always going on YouTube. But that wraps things up here. I'm Sebastian High, Director of European Scouting over at Dauber Prospects, typically joined by Hadi Kalakesh, who is currently enjoying himself at the Hlinka Gretzky tournament. And we hope that you tune back in very shortly.